myself. My name is Bianca Gonzalez, and I'm the Bullying Prevention Program Coordinator with the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation. I want to go ahead and thank our sponsor and partner, our biggest sponsor and partner in everything that we do, the Riverside Medical Clinic. We just want to thank you and just let you know that we appreciate you and all the hard work that you're doing during this time. And just a couple of just logistics with the webinar. Everybody's aware of the chat box, so I don't think I really have to explain that too much, but we might have some questions for you. So if any questions are asked by our presenter today, please feel free and answer through the chat box. Or you also have an option if you scroll down, there is an open question portion where you can leave any comments or questions as well. We will be having a Q&A at the end, so any questions or comments will be answered by our presenter as well. So with that being said, I'm super excited about today's webinar. I think it's a great fit for what we're currently, experiencing during these times. So I want to go ahead and before I introduce our presenter for today, we are going to provide offers, and you're going to be seeing a green bar pop up above the webinar. And these offers are just ways for you to stay connected with us through our social media, our website, but also ways that you can stay connected with Jessie. And then a brief survey that we're going to be providing for you as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce our presenter for today. Her name is Jessica Fuller, or as I and everyone else calls her, Jessie Fuller. She's the California League of Schools Teacher of the Year with experience in both comprehensive and alternative settings. Jessie brings a passion, knowledge, and experience to her work. She currently teaches at a continuation high school in Corona, California, and she works with At Promise Youth. And they have taught her the vital role relationships, expectations, and hope play in supporting adolescents who face severe challenges and have experienced trauma. She also provides coaching and professional learning to educators in a variety of areas, including social emotional learning, resiliency, trauma-informed practices, equity, and mindfulness through Thriving University. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and give it away to the amazing Jessie Fuller.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Bianca. Thank you, Linda, for inviting me to be here today. I am very grateful, always excited to work with you guys. And thank you to everybody who attended. I really appreciate it. I see lots of familiar faces, or I should say familiar names. So thank you. Thank you, Mom, for being here. And really just truly, and those folks that I don't know yet, thank you for carving out some time. In some ways, it seems, right now we should have all this time because we're at home. But if you're anything like me, I'm finding that it's actually more to balance in our change, right? That before, when I would go to work, I'd have a space to do the things I needed to do for work. But now I'm trying to adjust and do my work from here and do things that usually I would be able to do with people live at a work site, while also staring at a load of laundry that needs to be folded. So things are busy and full, and your days might look a little bit like this if you are working from home, where you just feel like you're surrounded by screens most of the day, right? And jumping from one Zoom to the next Zoom or Google Classroom if you're in education, right? There's just a lot of screen action happening. Or if you're a parent and you're facilitating at-home learning, maybe your days feel a little bit like this, because I know I am there too. I am a trained secondary teacher, but now by default, I am a second and kinder teacher. And my mother-in-law actually asked my daughter, my second grader, the other day, so what would you rate your teachers? Thinking this was like a fun, lighthearted, nice question. And she was like, oh yeah, they're okay. They definitely have some growing to do. So there you have it, folks. My evaluation from the year, from the voice of an 8-year-old. So if you think you're like not, if you think that other people are doing this great, there you have it. 16-year teacher, California Teacher of the Year. I have a lot of growing to do, according to Miss Addie. So we're all adjusting to the change. So I want to start by asking a few questions, and feel free. These questions can be totally reflective and rhetorical, and you can just answer in your head. Or, if you want to let it go and do some in the chat box, that's great too. So just some questions to think about. Have you ever found yourself like you're driving somewhere, and maybe I know you're not driving as much now, but when you drive somewhere, you get in your car, you go to the destination, and you arrive at the destination, but in between when you got in the car and when you arrived, you're like, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know where I went, right? Like, you drove for like some time, but you're like, I don't know what transpired. Or maybe you have been in a spot like me before, like where I'll say something, and like the moment I say it, I'm like, oh, like bring that back. Like you just wish that would not have come out of your mouth, right? Like what was an inner thought should not have come outside, right? Or maybe you are in a spot where like at nighttime, you just find yourself with kind of a busy brain, and you have a hard time sleeping because you have all these thoughts that are swirling through your mind, and your mind won't quiet down, and you kind of feel restless, right? All those things are very common, right? And I think especially in the most normal, if we even have normal of times or calm of times, we can probably find ourselves answering yes to many of those things, right? But I think it's especially that way right now when we're in a time of change, in a time of uncertainty. And there's really some good reason for that. So just want to talk briefly about what our brain on stress looks like. Remember those commercials? This is going to date me. Remember those commercials where they were like an anti-drug campaign, like it was a pan and it had an egg, like this is your brain. And then it did the egg sizzling. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? So anyway, this is your brain. This is your brain on stress. I'll save you some images, but so brains on stress, right? We know that we have brains that their number one goal is to keep us alive, right? Oftentimes when I'm in workshops with teachers, I'll say, what's the brain's number one job? And they often will say, well, to learn. And that's wonderful. And that's the brain does that for us. But the number one job is survival. So the brain is always scanning for danger, whether it's physical danger or emotional danger, right? So whether that's you're in a dark alley and you're like a little nervous and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. Your brain's scanning to keep you safe, right? Or if it's emotional danger, like when you're in a situation and you feel like you're the only one who feels the way you do, or you feel like you're alone in a situation, right? It triggers the same thing. What it does is it activates our stress reaction, right? And so ordinarily, where our brain, we have our nice little handy-hand model from Dr. Dan Siegel. Thank you, Dr. Dan, neurobiologist, who tells us, there's the brainstem, and here's the front of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. And we love this part of our brain. This is like the part of our brain that regulates impulsivity and rational decision-making and helps us to stay tuned in. It's the part of our brain that right now you may be thinking like, I got a lot of other things to do, or I'm hungry and thinking like, what am I even going to eat tonight? Or like, do I have food in the fridge? And yet you're able to stay tuned in to the webinar because it gives you that attentional focus. But when we're stressed out, woo, shoot, all that goes out the window, right? And we flip our lid. And what takes over? Our amygdala, right? Or as I like to call her, Amy G. Dalla, right? And when Amy G takes over, Amy G sets us off into fight, flight, or freeze. So some of us fight uncomfortable emotions or thoughts, right? We go into this fight mode, like we're like, why am I even feeling this way? Or we should on ourselves, right? I shouldn't be feeling this way. Let me say that slowly because I have a lisp. We don't want to should on ourselves, my friends, right? Stop the shoulding, right? I shouldn't feel this way. Or we blame, if only like my kids would be cleaning up the house more, then like things would be like more like orderly, or if only my spouse would help out more around the house, just saying hypothetically, right? Or if only, right? So we get into this fight mode when we feel these like uncomfortable emotions or these thoughts, or we get into a flight mode, right? Which is kind of how I respond often, which is I'm not even going to acknowledge that you're there. It's like kids when they're ignoring, teasing. They're like, na boob. Like, I can't hear you. It's kind of like we go into this, I'm not going to acknowledge that I feel this way. Like you're too uncomfortable and you're too overwhelming of an emotion. I don't even want to acknowledge you. Right. So we go into like that flight mode, or another way is we freeze, right? We're just overwhelmed and we stop kind of acting and being the people we want to be. So one way that we can just respond to this is through being mindful, right? Our body has a natural way to engage or to bring us back online, right? To tap into that prefrontal cortex and get us back into the spot where we can show up as the people we want to be. Because we know when we're here, when we're in that amygdala hijack, brains in pain can't learn the way we want to. We can't be the parents we want to. We can't be the leaders we want to. We can't be the colleagues we want to. And so this is just a way to become a little bit in tune with our body so we can show up as the people we want to be more regularly. So being mindful, there's a lot of different ways to define it, but I like what John Kabat-Zinn says, a longtime mindfulness teacher, and he just says it's paying attention on purpose in the present moment without any judgment, and it allows us to respond rather than to react. Another way I like to think of it is just being where your feet are. We spend so much of our day thinking about the future, like what's going to happen, or what if this, right? Or we spend it ruminating on the past. And being mindful is just that invitation to put your focus where your feet are, right? So being in that moment. And a simple practice I like to use, and I have been using it a lot since we've been sheltering at home, is just a simple breathing practice, which is smell the flowers, blow out the candles. So my furry friends are modeling this really well. But all you're going to do is you're going to take an inhale. So in a moment, if you want to get comfortable, I invite you to do this. And mindful position mindful bodies shouldn't be at all uncomfortable. Some people like to envision they have a little like string coming up from behind them, not so it's stiff, but just so you feel like you're a little open, right? You can have your hands in your lap or up or down, totally up to you. And feel free to do this with your eyes closed or open. Nobody's going to see you. You're in the veil of your own little, space, which is great. And so we're just going to go ahead and smell the flowers. We're going to inhale and blow out the candles, exhale. So here we go, my friends. Smell the flowers and blow out the candles. Smell the flowers and blow out the candles. Smell the flowers and blow out the candles. And I'm telling you, I've had to use this so much. It seems so simple. But I know I've needed to call on this. I think of last night when my kids were fighting over what show to watch, if it was Polly Pocket or Star Wars, and what started as a pretty amicable discussion quickly, deteriorated into, you're the worst brother ever. You don't ever let me watch what I want to watch. And here I am just trying to clean up dinner, right? I'm just trying to clean up some dishes. And so before I went in there to just start saying be quiet, I had to take a breath and think about, how do I want to show up right now for my kids, right? Or I'll be really candid. I got just as I was actually preparing for this speech talk today, I got some really sad news, some heavy news about a student that I really care about. And I just had to take a breath, right? Or another student I was talking to, and she was just sad because she's like, I miss school so much, Fuller. And I she's had so many questions, are we going to start on time next year? And those are things that are really all out of my control. I don't have the answers. But what I can do, what is in my control, is I can control how I show up for her in that moment, right? So I find myself using that quite often. And I'm reminded of a quote, thinking specifically of how we interact with youngers, because I know many of us are involved with education, or we are parents. And this is a great quote by an author activist. And she says, when little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not join in their chaos. And I just think about that man, we're decisive elements, right? We set the tone in whatever environment we're in. And as hard as that is, right? Well, we may be experiencing a lot of big things. We get the chance to spread whatever it is, whether that's stress or calm, but we always have that choice. And I think you could take out the word little. I mean, when people are overwhelmed by big emotions, right? Whether it's your colleague, whether it's your friend, whether it's your partner, whoever it is, we have the chance to have this emotional ripple. And we know that that's important because we know emotions are contagious, right? We know that. In fact, my world, is education. So there's some great research around what impact does the presence of an adult have on others. They wanted to see specifically, is stress contagious in the classroom? And so what they did is they just surveyed teachers, and they said, hey, can you take a stress survey? Say how stressed out you are. Something like they gave it to their neighbor, right? Because my neighbor, he might have a few things to say about me, right? And say oh yeah, Fuller, she's stressed, right? No, it was totally like a self-reflection. So teachers surveyed themselves or took the survey, and then they went to students, elementary students in this case, and they took saliva samples from them, which I would have just loved to have been a fly on the wall, right? Can you imagine hey kids, why don't you go ahead and set your binders to the side right now? I just need to take a little swab of that spit. So just out of curiosity, friends, why do you think, feel free to put it in the chat box, why do you think they were collecting spit samples from 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds? What were they trying to accomplish in spit collection? Oh, I love it. Some people are like, oh, I know the answer. If you've heard me before, you probably know the answer, right? Well, what they were measuring was cortisol. In our saliva, we carry the stress hormone. So at any given time, if we have the proper, machinery for measuring it, we can measure how much stress we have, which is pretty amazing. And you can see where this is going, right? The higher the stress that teachers reported, the higher levels of cortisol. The lower levels of stress that teachers had reported, the lower presence of cortisol. I mean, it's crazy, right? Which might lead to the question chicken or the egg. Maybe it's that year, if we're talking education here, where you just have a lot of kids with a lot of needs who have a lot of stress, right? Or maybe it's the year that you have a lot of stress. We're not robots, right? We have things that we carry as adults. But I don't think the question is like, who brought it? Like, was it you? Like, was it you, Joey? I know it was you, right? I don't think it's about like pinpointing who brought it. I think it's how do we, again, create practices that help us to navigate in stressful situations in ways, in times, especially like now when we can't control the external situations. How do we create our own internal calm? When we can't control the external landscape, how do we cultivate an internal landscape that we're happy with? So one thing, when things are a little uncertain, is we can have a lot of different feelings, right? Dr. Mark Brackett, he's awesome. He is a gentleman who wrote Permission to Feel. He's the founder of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. He surveyed folks about 3 weeks into this quarantine to find out what were people feeling. Now, unsurprisingly, he found that one of the most reported feelings was anxiety, right? But what he also found, he said, that was kind of interesting that in some folks in their reporting, there was this coupling. So they were both anxious and grateful, hopeful and overwhelmed. It was like these paradoxical feelings, and there was this presence of kind of both. And actually, weekly, I give my students a little Google form check-in. Each week, I want to see just how they're feeling, how they're doing, and how they're keeping up with their mental health. And here's what some of my kids were saying. You'll see a lot of kids in green who said they were frustrated, orange, anxious, right? Some feeling content or peaceful, and then several also feeling kind of a collection of all of the above. So I think it's very typical to have a lot of different things going on at the same time, or in any given day have a lot of different feelings. So I want to just open that up to you, as I would love for you to take a minute to kind of just check in with yourself. And it seems like almost like such a silly or simple question, like, how are you feeling really? But I found for me, this is really necessary because I'm a doer. So I'm always swept up in doing the next thing. But I think one of the other benefits of being mindful and in the moment is just really checking in with yourself. Like really, and even if you're like, I'm a little sad, but I put up a good feelings wheel. I don't know if it's too small for you to see, but just really getting a little more nuanced and allowing yourself permission to feel both. I think some of us like, is it okay to even feel this way? Like, is it okay to feel mutually like anxious, but also grateful? Like, is something wrong? And I don't think that's wrong at all. There's no judgment. There's no manual of how you should feel right now. I think the important part is being honest about it. So if you want to take a minute, just how would you say you feel today? I see a lot of you chiming in, and I just want to say thank you so much. I see a lot of people just being really honest with how they feel. I almost think it's a hard question to even answer. Like when someone texts, like, how are you doing? It's like, well, do you want the full real answer? Or do you want, like, it's just even, it's kind of a complicated question, especially now. So again, thank you. I see. Yeah, just really some good, candid answers. And hopefully you're seeing there's kind of a pattern, right? There's a lot of boths or yes ands. And I just want to invite you with one more thing. I just want you to know what you did was kind of a powerful act in and of itself. Another really great strategy, one thing that being mindful in the moment affords us, or when we're tuned in with our body, is to be aware of how we're feeling. And just by naming what we're feeling tames it. Right? Again, I will be the first to tell you, man, I do so much work around social emotional learning now because I needed it, right? It wasn't for my students. People are like, oh, your students really need it. I'm like, no, I needed it, right? I realized my coping strategy was like, oh, I'll just tuck that difficult emotion into a folder to deal with. Never, right? I love just denying it and tidying it up. Feeling like if I let it in, it might just overwhelm me. But then I realized what we do when we just can name our emotion and be candid about it in the moment, we're actually doing some really great things for our brain. We're connecting the right side of our brain, which is really thinks in wholes and thinks in raw, like emotion. It doesn't really think in language, with our left side of the brain that's more linear, logical. So by naming our emotions, we're helping our brain to make sense of what's going on, which then tames or lessens or dampens like the severity of the emotion. So naming and taming, it's a great little tool. It's really helpful for littles too. I've used the feelings wheel actually quite a bit now with my kids as they're experiencing some really big emotions while being home. One other way to think of just emotions is the word you even hear in emotions is motion, right? So if you think about it, emotions just need to do that. They need to move through us. And it makes me think of like a roller coaster. And I don't know how you were on your first roller coaster ride. I wish I was way cooler, but I was such a weenie. I still remember my first ride at Boblo Island, which is in Detroit, Michigan. The theme park shut down in the 90s, which is a great idea. It probably should. Super unsafe, but super fun. And my friend Mandy and I went on the Blue Streak. It was our first roller coaster. And here's Mandy being like, woo! And she's just living her best life, giving herself completely over to the experience. And here I am like white knuckling it, right? Two people living through the exact same experience, or so I should say moment, but experiencing it entirely differently, right? Mandy puts her hands up, knowing that yes, you're going to go up, you're going to go down, there's going to be some lefts and rights, but eventually that ride will come to an end. That moment will come to an end. Where here I was in this fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? Just fighting the moment. And I think sometimes if we can just with emotions say, hey, they're here, they're not permanent, and my emotions are not me, right? Like I may feel sad right now, but it doesn't mean make me a sad person always. I may feel angry, and that's maybe even justifiable, but don't need to become an angry person, right? So it just allows you a little separation between emotions. It allows us, I think, when we're mindful in the moment to get curious rather than furious, right? I love the idea of becoming like this emotional scientist, right? So in the moment of when you feel something, even asking yourself some questions, getting curious, not furious about why you're feeling this. Because a lot of times, again, we should on ourselves. I shouldn't be feeling this way. But just asking, like, what caused me to feel this way? Like I've noticed lately, I feel a little low. And when I was feeling that, I was like, what is causing that? A lot of times it was after I got off social media. I'm a big comparer. So I was like comparing myself like, oh, look at these moms doing all these wonderful things for their kids, or look at these teachers doing all these wonderful lessons, right? And so I had to realize, oh, there's something that kind of triggered that in me. So start to be curious. Is there any patterns to how you might feel and what's happening before it? What's within me that's so bothered by it? And then what's in my control to create a more positive outcome? Sorry, my little hula hooper got cut off my word. But the reality is I can't control the situation at large, right? I can't control, when we're going to be not sheltering at home anymore. I can't control those big items, but I can control how much I go on social media. I can control how much news I watch, right? I can control some scenarios around my kids. If I find like there's certain times of the day they fight each other, we need to change up our routine and do something so that they have something to do so they don't take it out on each other, right? I like to say, what's in my hula hoop? What do I have control over? There's a lot I don't. So I'm just going to put all my energy into what I can. So thinking of your hoop, because between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response, right? And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. I think this is such a powerful quote when you consider who said it. It's from Viktor Frankl. He's a psychologist, and he was also imprisoned in Auschwitz, right? So trained psychologist observing the most heinous conditions, right? Experiencing them himself and watching others go through it, and watching how some took their life as a result of this really terrible external thing that's been thrust upon them, right? And then others didn't. And he said in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he said, the only place we're free is between what's happening outside that we can't control and how we respond to it. And I think this is a great analogy for mindfulness. Mindfulness just helps increase that space so we can continue to show up and decide, how do I want to show up in this moment? Show up as the people we want to be, right? As the friends we want to be, as the partners we want to be, as the parents we want to be. So sometimes we just are so caught up in a feeling or an idea that we just need to bring ourselves back to the moment. So another quick exercise I do quite a bit when I'm just so spun up, like I'm just like, okay, I'm thinking, I know I'm anxious, I know I'm the future thinking, I'm so spun up here, and I can't logic my way through it. Is just to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So again, if you want to get in a comfortable position, this is just a grounding practice. It's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 smell, 1 you can taste. So we're just going to try that. So 5 things you can see. So I could see my window, I could see my plants, I can see my water bottle, I can see my desk, and I can see my yoga mat. So go ahead and you can just say it. Well, you can say it aloud. I don't think anyone's going to hear you. So say it aloud to yourself. But 5 things you can see. Then go ahead and 4 things you can feel. So I can feel the chair underneath me, can feel my headphones, can feel my bracelet that Addie, my daughter, made me, and I can feel my toes on the floor. So go ahead, 4 things you can feel. Okay, now 3 things you can hear. So I can hear the fan. I can hear my kids out in the playroom because my husband is great and is playing with them right now. And I can hear a little bit of the breeze from outside. A hot breeze. I should close my window. Go ahead and do that. Then 2 things you can smell. I can smell the air and my minty chapstick. I tried to really moisturize for you all. I hope you can tell. And then 1 thing you can taste. And I can taste my toothpaste because I also tried to brush my teeth. So I hope you can smell my fresh breath through this Web Ninja. Web, I think that's the platform we're on. So that's a great one. It's actually a great one too for any ages. In fact, the smelling the flowers, blowing out the candles, start it with littles, 3 and up. I would say this same thing. I use this with my kiddos. It's super helpful. Or other kids, like I had another student this week, just really anxious, and I was able to walk her through this. So it's a really quick, in the moment practice to bring you back to present awareness. Another great one is a 4-7-8 breath. Dr. Weil came up with this, and essentially deals with breath again. But this time you're just kind of counting your breath. So if you want to join me again in mindful bodies of just breathing in for 4 seconds. So inhale for 4, hold for 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and exhale for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll try that again, okay? And with eyes open or closed, whatever your preference, you're going to inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. I'll count aloud as you can kind of follow along in your head. So inhale for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold for 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, exhale for 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I find myself doing that a lot during the day. If I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, at night. Night's really when I have a hard time sleeping, or I'll wake up in the middle of the night, can't go back to sleep. Another one I really love is just counting your breath. So you count your breath, like inhale and exhale counts as 1. You count all the way up to 10, and then you start over at 1. I do that a lot at night when I'm having trouble sleeping or having trouble falling back to sleep. So Grandma knew what she was talking about, right? Counting sheep. It's the same thing. It's just you're bringing your mind to the present moment, okay? The last little thing I want to leave you with as we close out our webinar is just inviting you to some self-compassion. And I think this gets like a bad rap. I'll be honest. I'm like a resistant self-compassion giver. I'm like, that's soft. I'm soft. I'm not soft. I'm a doer again, right? But it's really just treating yourself the same way you would treat a good friend, right? For example, if a friend came to you right now and was like, man, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. Like I was okay the first few weeks of quarantine, but it's like really affecting me. I didn't think it would. And I'm just feeling pretty overwhelmed and alone. And I highly doubt your response to that friend would be, yeah, you really should be doing this better, right? Yeah, you're pretty weak, right? You would never say that to somebody you love, right? And yet we say some really harsh things to ourselves, right? Like my really critical self-talk is usually my default when I'm really getting down on myself is like, man, you're just not doing enough, which then becomes you're not enough. You're inadequate. Like you're not measuring up right now to being what, like I should be doing more to, because I think a lot of us on the webinar, just knowing your backgrounds and what you deal with, nonprofits and education, we're doers and we want to do things for other people. We're helpers. We're like, I should be doing more, right? Again, shooting on ourselves. And I think we just need to have some grace with ourselves and recognize, hey, we're doing the best we can. And to talk to yourself the way you would talk to a friend, right? I would never say, again, some of the things I say to myself to a friend. And I think one thing I used to think is if I'm like gentler with myself, that's going to like stop my motivation or stop my ambition. But really, again, in learning the science behind it, when we're critical with ourselves, guess what? Bing! We activate that stress response again. So the very thing we don't want to do, we do. We want to have full faculties and full capabilities to engage in the best way possible. So we really need to be speaking to ourselves well, so we can be in that fully present, great spot, mind, or headspace. So one more little exercise I love to do is just breathing in. I do my best, and I take an inhale. Breathing out, I let go of the rest. I call it my little micro mindfulness, right? And it's just a quick way in the moment to have a little bit of self-compassion. So we'll try it right now. So breathing in, so inhale. I do my best. Breathing out, exhale. I let go of the rest. So breathing in, I do my best. Breathing out, exhale. I let go of the rest. And we give ourselves a little grace, right? Really important, I think, right now to give ourselves some self-compassion. And my final tidbit to us in those moments where we are feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling like this change is happening, is to just know that we have the power to look for the good, right? Our brains are like Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive, right? Our brains don't need any help in figuring out when something is going wrong, right? When you put your hand on a hot stove, your brain's not like, oh, should I keep it there? Should I leave it there? Burning feels good. No. Your brain registers pain, physical or emotional, in 0 seconds, right? But it takes the brain a little longer to take in or savor the good. So another thing I often find myself doing when I'm feeling overwhelmed or feeling incompetent, or just when I'm spun up in a thought of like, well, what's going to happen? When is it going to end? Right? All these things. I just, okay, what's in my control? Going back to my hula hoop, thinking of things that I'm most grateful for. So as we close out here, I would love to invite you, just if you could, think of one thing specifically that you're grateful for. And if you can, the more specific you can be with the gratitude, even the better, kind of a little bit of a bonus hit for you. It's really great for your well-being. Because if you can really hone in on, oh, what is it exactly, that I'm most grateful for? Like, I'm really grateful that my son made me a cute sign today because he's been waiting for me to get into the swimming pool. And I told him, as soon as it's 95 degrees, I'll get in. So he wrote me a little note that says, it's 95 degrees, Mom, right? Like, I'm grateful that I have a kiddo who wants to swim and play with me, right? So go ahead and take a minute to think of something you're grateful for. And write it in the chat box if you'd like. I'll leave you with a few helpful apps. If you don't already have one, and you don't have to have an app to do any of the exercise we talked about, but oftentimes people say, well, what are some good apps? Calm is really lovely. I like Headspace a lot. It's great. It starts out with 1-minute mindfulness practices. That is definitely where I needed to start in my journey, because sitting down and breathing did not sound really great to me at the beginning. Stop, breathe, and think. And then the mood meter is really cool too. That was developed recently by, again, Mark Brackett out of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and that tracks your mood. So that's a very cool app. And I'll leave you with this, my wonderful friends who took the time to tune in today. One, again, thank you so much. It means the world to me. I appreciate you. I appreciate, especially, I needed some calm today.